Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. We'll just wait another 30 seconds or so as people enter into the webinar. Okay, numbers are still going up, which is great to see. So glad that so many of you could join us today. My name is Corinne Pullman. I am the Executive Vice President for Advocacy at the CFIB. It's my pleasure to be hosting this along with some colleagues who I'll introduce in a moment. I am coming to you from, I'm coming to you from Ottawa today, and I'd love to hear where you're coming from. So just as Jennifer and others have done, please throw into the chat. We got folks from Calgary, Cornelia, we have London, Ontario, Cambridge, Saskatoon, Winnipeg, Port Moody. We got lots of Western folks, Nanaimo, Regina, Sherwood Park, Alberta, excellent, Steinbach, Mississauga, Eganville, Vulcan, Parksville. So it's great to see people coming from so many quarters of Canada. This is an important topic, and I know for some of you, or many of you, it's something that you have a lot of questions about based on some of the feedback we've been getting in advance of this webinar. Before we jump into the webinar, just a few housekeeping things I wanted to mention. First of all, of course, is in that chat, before everybody put their towns in, there should be a copy of the presentation itself. So you're welcome to download it. We'll probably add it again to the chat one or two more times throughout the webinar, just so that you have access to it. So feel free to do that. And secondly, we just wanted you to know that we have both a chat and a Q&A function. So the Q&A function is one that we would prefer you to use if you are going to be asking questions. That helps us keep track of questions more easily. You're welcome, of course, to have comments in the chat and use that as well, but we would prefer, if you could, any questions you'd like to ask the panelists or CFIB, put them in the Q&A. Okay, with that, we want to welcome you to Navigating the CARM Portal Part 2. I've already introduced myself. Along with me today, I have Michelle Auger, who is our Senior Policy Analyst here in Ottawa as well. Michelle is responsible for this project. She has a lot of work on it over the course of the last year or two, as have others in the organization, but she's really been our lead. And in the background, we have Alicia Lee, who will be here to help answer some of those questions as they come up. We're also very honored to have with us Debbie Bermudez and Sabrina Tarzia, who are both senior program officers with the CBSA, and they will, of course, be walking you through most of the details of the CARM. So thank you to both of you for joining us. We'll get to them in a minute. So if we go to the next slide, just a quick overview. We're going to give you a very quick overview, Michelle and I, of what your perspective has been on this particular CARM system that will be introduced very shortly. And then we'll turn it over to our friends at CBSA to really walk you through a lot of the details. And hopefully we'll get to the end to get some questions answered as well. And then to the next one. So just a reminder of what CARM is. It's really the assessment and revenue management system that Canada Border Services Agency will be implementing, and it's to help streamline the way taxes and duties are collected by the CBSA on all sort of good commercial goods that are imported into Canada. It's basically taking it from paper to digital. That's essentially what they're trying to do, and hopefully in that process make it a bit easier. However, with a massive change like this, it can feel a lot harder at the beginning, but hopefully over time and with some of the feedback you're going to hear today, you'll be able to integrate into that at some point in the very near future. It's important to note that as of right now, October 21st, 2024 is when CARM will have to be used for importers if they want to import products into Canada. So you need to register for CARM. Many of you have, but many of you have not, and we'll talk about that in a second. We do have a link on the presentation for you to do that. This particular webinar is actually dig a bit more deeply into what CARM is all about. We did a part one of this webinar back in the spring, which really talks about the registration process. So if you've not even registered yet, you may want to start there and have a review of that particular webinar where we go into a lot of detail of the registration. And then this one is going to now, I presume you've already registered, and start talking about some of those things like financial security processes, billing cycles, and some real practical tips so you can transition to this new system. Okay, with that, I am going to turn it over to Michelle quickly to talk a little bit about what we've heard from you.
Great, thanks, Corinne. So just a few more minutes from our side here before we jump into the meat of the presentation. I'm already seeing some questions around cash deposits and obtaining security. So don't worry, the CBSA has built a great presentation, and we'll talk all about that stuff today. But so in August of 2024, we did resurvey our members on the registration rate of CARM. And what we found is that, in fact, we did see an increase from January of 2024, where only 25% of you were registered. So 38% of small businesses are registered. You know, it's great. It's good news to see this increase. However, I just want to point out that we still got 48% of small businesses who aren't registered. So if you're one of those businesses and you're planning on starting or continuing to import, it's incredibly important to get registered and familiarize yourself with the portal. As Corinne mentioned, we do have that part 1 webinar, so invite you to go take a look at that one. It really is a step-by-step instructions on how to get registered and what you need to get registered. And again, that webinar was hosted with CBSA. So again, today's webinar is more about learning the various components and the tools that exist within the portal, and we're gonna talk about that financial security portion in quite a bit of detail. So rather than holding us up, I will turn it over to our presentation from CBSA. So Debbie, please kick us off.
You're on mute, Debbie.
Yeah.
Of course I am. Okay, we always have to have one technical difficulty. I happen to be the technical difficulty for today for all of us, so you're welcome. Thank you so much, everyone. And we just wanted to take a moment for my team to CFIB. Thank you so much for having us here. It's such an honor to be able to provide this kind of awareness for your membership. So it's such an honor. Let's jump right into the presentation. We've titled it What You Need to Know, CARM October 2024, and it's launched. So today's webinar agenda, we're going to be going through the commercial accounting declaration. We're going to hear it referred to so often as a CAD, and this is a step-by-step detailed overview on what commercial accounting declaration is and how you can create one for yourself. Next, we're going to move into the release prior to payment, or the RPP program. We're going to be talking about billing cycles and payments, the cutover and transition period, which I know a lot of people are interested in as well. And we're going to follow up with some next steps resources, and of course, that question and answer period. So why don't we move directly into our first intro slide, and I love this one. We are going to be discussing, and we're shortly going to be entering into the CBSA assessment and revenue management CARM period. This is just like the wonderful introduction described, moving us from paper into the digital world. You still have time to register. And again, as was discussed earlier, there are lots of resources to help you out with that. But formally, CARM launches externally on October 21st, 2024. And you should register now. And we're going to be going on to some of the key changes they're going to be seeing come Release 3 after October 21st, 2024. So present day, especially if you are one of our C-type or cash-type importers, we're going to be looking at how that's changing for you. And we're going to move to 1 and 2 slides just above and start discussing what a commercial accounting declaration is and what it's replacing. So let's move on over to Customs Accounting Declaration CAD. Now, present day, when you are submitting an entry, we call it a B3 entry or your business entry. For whatever kind of importer you are submitting this business entry to account for your commercial goods. Now, if you are our smaller importers and you tend to be submitting your entries right at that port of entry, we would call you a C-type entry, a C-type importer, or a cash-type importer. These entries are done right at that port of entry, and you pay right at the time to obtain release. The second kind of form that you may or may not have seen in your importing career is something that you call a request for an adjustment form, or more routinely today referred to as the B2. Now, the Customs Accounting Declaration, or CAD, is going to be replacing both your B3 and your B2. So those forms are going to be combined, and you'll be able to perform both of those processes using a CAD, and you're going to be doing it right in the portal. So let's move to the next slide, and we're going to see submitting a Customs Accounting Declaration. Now, often when we talk about submitting people are like, well, I don't understand what the difference is. And this is why we wanted to make sure this slide was highlighted. For the majority of importers, what you'll be doing is you'll be going into and signing on to the portal with your business, your user account and your business. You're going to be completing that CAD that we were just talking about, and we're going to talk about more. The submission process, how the CBSA receives that CAD, is done directly in the portal. You submit it, you complete it, and you hit submit, and that's how it's provided and delivered to the CBSA. And that is the kind of submission that we are going to be focusing on today. However, if as your business grows and in the future you tend to you have a business which explodes and is much larger, then there are other options for submission, and that's something that can definitely be looked at later. But the two options that exist, we call web service or API, or electronic data interchange or EDI. Now, the only time that you would ever even worry about this submission form or type is if you are needing to submit literally hundreds and hundreds of declarations or CADs per day. It's a different way or a more efficient, unique way that your submission system is able to speak to the CARM client portal. For today, we're going to maintain our focus, and we're going to be looking at the CARM client portal and us, the small businesses, submitting our entries or our CADs in that way. So two things. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Debbie, I just wanted to say there seems to be a bit of feedback, so maybe if you could just take the mic slightly away from your mouth. Some folks have commented yet.
Oh, no, I appreciate that. You know what I can even do? Let me see if I can pull the audio setup. Thank you for letting me know, everyone. We want to make sure it's clear.
Yes.
Okay, how is that if I just give it an inch or two?
Yeah, it might be a little bit better. Let's try it, and then I'm sure folks will let us know if they're still.
Okay, and I'm happy to play with it. Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much, Grace. Okay, so those are the kind of types or ways that you're able to submit your CAD. However, for today, let's focus on submitting your CAD to the CARM client portal. And let's take a look at the next slide. Okay, so your CAD or your customs accounting declaration, the reason we're excited about it is it's flexible and it's convenient way for you to account for your goods. The screenshot that you see at the top, you're going to see declarations. Now, this is the point, as was discussed before, you already have a profile and you're ready to start completing your entries or your CADs in the portal itself. You are going to go in that screenshot at the top, which says declarations. That's the actual screen that you are going to be seeing. Now you'll notice that there's 3 buttons on that screenshot right at the top. The top left, which is highlighted, is create a new commercial accounting declaration or your new CAD. But I want us to take a moment and just visually do a little tour of this declaration screen, because it will be important to be comfortable in this screen for future CADs and for future business. If you look over to the right of that screenshot, you're going to see view the list of submitted declarations. What's nice about this is that once you've submitted a couple declarations in the portal, that button right there is where you're able to go in and see your past declarations. You can see what you've put in with all of the information that you've included. So it's a nice way to refer back to your past declarations in full detail. Now the second button, yep.
We've got about 2 or 3 questions of folks asking whether or not CADs can still be filled out by their brokers. So maybe we can quickly just address that one as you're talking about the CADs here. No,
of course, yeah, definitely. And in fact, this is one of another thing that we're going to be covering, I believe, a little bit in this deck. So yes, the system is set up so you can still benefit from working with your broker. The process is that you are going to be creating, please come and see the other webinar or refer back to the webinar that was kind of more the intro webinar, because it will very much in detail outline how you are able to sign in and create a profile for yourself in the portal. Next, creating that profile for your business, but the piece that Michelle is talking about and that all of you are asking about is a step called delegation of authority. So what you're able to do is actually create that business relationship or delegate authority to your customs broker. So instead of you completing this CAD, if you so wish, you're going to afford the ability for your broker to complete these steps on your behalf. I will keep talking, but if we have any more questions, feel free to pop in. We want to make sure this is as helpful as possible.
Yeah, and just, we're
Yeah.
still getting some people who are finding it difficult to hear you. So
Are
if
you?
you
Okay.
could just,
Of course.
yeah, I think it's just, it's more that it just feels like your mic is too close to your mouth.
Okay,
So
no problem. Let's see if I can actually remove this.
apologies, those that are listening. We thought we had dealt with this at the beginning of the webinar, but things can change. And so hopefully we can fix this and make it easier for folks to understand Debbie, because she's sharing some pretty important information.
Now, how are you finding this?
That's much better.
Is that much better? Fantastic. I apologize, folks. I really appreciate taking the time to let me know. We want this to be useful and helpful for everyone. So we were just discussing how you're able to get your broker or allow your broker to perform these services for you. And that's through delegating authority to your broker and then creating that business relationship between yourself and them, and they can perform services for you. So this is what your broker will do, or if you're choosing to submit your CADs on your own, then these are the steps you will take. So we just looked at being able to look at your past list of submitted declarations, and we're going to take a quick look at that declaration screen again, just on the bottom, where you see a title says, create a new temporary importation. Now, the reason that this process has a separate button or a separate access point is that to create a temporary importation for commercial goods, it necessarily is actually an entirely different process. You will be creating a declaration. However, this declaration only needs to process goods which are entering Canada for a shortened period of time or a temporary period of time. The form type is different, the fields are different, and the way that it's going to be processed, even in the portal, is different than the completion of a formal accounting declaration for the release of goods to enter the Canadian marketplace. We can go into more later, and we invite anybody, if there's further questions, to reach out to us later. But for now, we want to make sure we maintain focus on creating a commercial accounting declaration. So let's bring our attention back up to that top left, and it's highlighted in the orange color, and you're going to select to create a new accounting declaration. Now, once you do that, it is going to pop up your ability to choose your declaration type. Now, we were talking before, and I was looking for any updated resources to send you. Right now, we're in the middle of kind of transitioning access to all of our updated user guides and playbooks and making them available to the public online. However, we're still waiting for all of that to happen. It's actually kind of out of our hands. It's something that's being taken care of by a lot of our web providers and stuff, so that will be coming. But for now, I can say that right now, we are going to highlight for most of our smaller importers that you are going to be submitting either a type C, which is that cash type or entry that you complete and submit directly at that port of entry. Or you may also be looking at submitting something called a voluntary. And that would only ever happen if you had received goods and then you realize you hadn't fully accounted for them. Those are the two ones that we'll primarily focus on. But for today, to use our example, I've selected to use a type C or that cash type, and we're going to be doing it. And the title for that declaration type is to obtain release of goods. I select it in the list, and I'm going to select next, which you can't see, but I'm telling you it's there, and it's going to move us over to our next step. And by selecting type C, it's going to give us access to that template. I see Corinne. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the question that's come up a couple times right now is, do you fill out these forms or do all this information in the system before the goods come to Canada or after? So the timing thing, I think, is a bit a question that's happening here. Yeah.
No, these are great questions. Perfect. So if you are going to be submitting a C type or a cash type declaration, you have some options after October 21st. Present day, often what you would be doing is you would need to wait until the exact day of arrival, at least, because you're going to be needing to be considerate of the interest rates at that time of movement and arrival. Now, if you are going to be completing this CAD or this customs accounting declaration in the portal, you are able to complete the majority of it in the portal at any time within 30 days of actually needing to submit this entry. Now we're going to go over what this is, but what's been created in a tool that's provided in the portal that we've never seen before is the ability for the creation of a template, both for your vendor and for your commodity. Second to that, you can also create a draft of any CAD that you think you're going to be submitting, which tied to the question that was just asked is, I ordered some goods and I know they're coming in within the next day or two. I have some time now. Can I start my CAD? And the answer is yes, because you can complete the majority of it and save it in a draft form for up to 30 days. But I promise we're going to go through this again, but that's a fantastic question. And it leads us a lot into kind of some of the extra tools and services which have been made available to importers that we've always wanted, and now we can offer you. Okay, so we have selected the C-type CAD declaration type. We said next, and this is going to bring us over to the template that is being offered to us by the portal. So each declaration type will offer the user a different template because each declaration type necessarily requires different information to be submitted. A C-type declaration type to obtain release of goods. The first screen you're going to see is going to just select kind of like that core information, the base information, your declaration type, that name, your office, the CBSA Office of Processing, the region it's going to be in, kind of that core information. You're going to select Begin Declaration. That will move you into the opportunity to have a quick overview of the information you've already put in. So before you go ahead and complete your full declaration, what you're going to have is kind of a reminder, okay, this is the declaration type you selected, and you have the opportunity as well to look up at the top right, verify you're in the correct RM account, and you can see, yes, RM account is correct. Now, just since we're talking about RM accounts, I did want to take a moment here. Most of us will know, but just in case, we all have, as importers, we have our BN9, and that's that business number which is issued by the Canada Revenue Agency. Okay, now when we enroll in a CBSA import-export program, you are granted an RM account or a program identifier. For any importers who are currently importers here, you will recognize this number because that RM identifier is usually an RM0001. It may have a different number ending, but it's that RM identifier which makes it your CBSA program identifier. And when you are submitting your transactions, your entries, and now your CADs, you're going to be tying it to your import business number, which is also known as your RM15. And it's that business number which combines your CRA or your business number and the RM0001. And that's what you normally use when you're submitting current day your B3s and later on your CADs. Okay, so you're going to review the information here and you're like, I'm in the right account. You're going to select bottom right. You can't see it, but I promise it's there. And it's going to move you into step 1. And those are your general details. So we're going to move slides and go over creating a declaration. Step 1, general details. Again, most of this is your basic expected details to begin. We wanted to highlight 2 pieces here, which kind of highlights those extra tools which are available now. When you're going through the portal, and if there's a field that you're not sure what you need, we've already planned for that. So to the right of these fields or the titles of the fields, you're going to see a little I in the circle, and that means information. You select that, and that information icon will give you a brief description of what is called for in that field, what information is needed. Now, the second piece is what we kind of just touched on, and it was a wonderful question, and it brought us to here. On the bottom, you're going to see another button which says make a draft or CAD draft, I think. I've got old eyes, we'll see. I think it says save draft. It's the green button. And what happens there is it allows you to save at whatever point you've already completed that CAD, and you're going to save it at that point for the next 30 days. Amazing skill, amazing tool. Right now, if you're working through your B3 and you have to walk away from the machine, especially if you are a C-type client, you lose all your work. Now, with a draft, you can go back to it when it works for your business. Let's move to the next step, and we're going to look at step 2, and that is your invoices. Now, with our step 2, there's a few slides that are tied to this step. but they flow naturally. It's just to afford you space to provide all the information. So when we look at step 2 invoices, this first page is talking about your invoice details. And it's going to be like your invoice number, your purchase order number, port of export, if it's applicable. Now, this is the page where we touched on a little bit before, the ability to create a template for your vendor. So if you routinely order from the same vendor, say there's always a place that you order your school t-shirts from for your distribution center located in Ottawa. You always order from this vendor. Well, the first time you go in, you're going to complete all of that vendor information, and you're going to select, I wish to save the information for future declarations. As soon as you select that and save, it's going to populate up at the top, and it will afford you the ability to just pull that vendor template. And every time you need to include that vendor, you can just pull the template and all of the fields will auto-populate for you. And this ties into the next template type, which is afforded. And we're going to slide over into the next slide, creating a declaration. Step 2, continued commodities. Beautiful. So just as we could create a template for your vendor, you can also create a template for your commodities. So going back to that example I used, you always buy your school shirts for distribution from that same vendor. Well, you probably also buy similar shirts every time because it's always the same schools or parents who are buying them from you. If you were routinely bringing in the same commodity, you're able to complete the first time all of this information and then elect to create a template for this commodity. Now, the second tool we want to highlight here, and it's one of my favorite tools. I was a border officer for years and years, and I would routinely see, especially my smaller importers, struggle to know how to classify their goods because it's not common description. We ask for a shirt that's blue in size medium. We want it to be made in cotton, things like this. And that's how you order your goods, and that's how you run your business. But for classification, we need to identify a classification number. You may have also heard it called a harmonized system or an HS code. We have a tool for that. So now what happens is if you're going in, you're trying to figure out your classification number and you're not sure, you're going to see there's a button here and it says, help me classify. And this button is directly to the right of the classification number field. You will select that button, put in your information, and most commodities are able to come up here and they will give you not just the classification number, which is a 10-digit harmonized system number or a classification number. It will also provide you the classification description. Now, this description is the formal description as linked for the Government of Canada to that classification number. But we'll all notice that there's a final field in the bottom which says a narrative description. Now, this is where we highly recommend you put the description that you use with your business. You will most likely not refer using the classification description or even that HS code when you're speaking with either your clients or your employees or people that you work with. You're probably going to be saying, hey, we want to order 100 more of those blue school t-shirts. Can you order those in? And that's the description we recommend that you put in there. And that's also the description we recommend that you use when you title that template for commodity that you were creating just a bit earlier. Amazing. Let's move on to the next slide. Beautiful. And this is your final step or your final section, I guess, a final step for creating a declaration. Now, this is step 3, and this is review and submit. And it's not that you're going to be doing so much practical work here. It's more that you're going to be taking a moment to review and make sure the information you've already provided is true and correct. You're going to go to review and submit, and you're going to see the screenshot that we're showing here with kind of the green section up top. And when you're seeing up there, you're seeing declaration valid, and that's an important message. Now, the CARM system itself will do a basic review of the declaration that you have submitted. And the things that it's looking for are all the fields complete? Does the information make sense when coupled with the other information? And sometimes people, wonder, well, how would it know if it makes sense? And one of my best examples of that is, for example, if you are using a classification number that routinely pulls up the need for extra documentation or something different, there is going to be a little bit of a check in there saying, hey, importer or broker working for importer, make sure you have all the documentation that you need. Or be sure this is all the information that's required. So it's a little bit of a checkpoint to assist you in making sure that everything you submit is complete. If we find that there's other things, that could be sent to an officer, but the majority of time, this will allow you to have a complete declaration. If you're looking, you're like, yes, it looks good to me. I'm going to select yes, and then it's going to create this small little, you see the small one on the right, and it's going to create your estimated declaration of duties and taxes. And it'll do your full breakdown, as well as tell you how much duties and taxes are owed at this time. You will elect saying, yep, I attest the information is accurate and true. And then you will select submit declaration. Now, just as we were talking before, when you submit this declaration, you're submitting it. And if, for example, you are our C type or our cash type importer, and you're right at that port of entry, you've submitted it. And while you've created your declaration in the CARM client portal, you will be printing out 2 copies to allow you to pair it up with your other support documentation and submit it for review, processing, and the ability to pay right at that time to allow release of goods at that time. And then you'll be done. Okay, fantastic. Let's move over. And I just want to highlight for a few minutes here, or hopefully 2 minutes. I'll be quick if I can. You've already finished your declaration. You've submitted. Everything is good. Let's look at one of the points for changes to a CAD before and after the payment due date. So we're going to move to the next slide, and we're going to look at 2 different periods which are important. The first period we're going to look at is that correction period. Now, does everyone remember way back when I was talking about the submission where you can request an adjustment, or that form has also sometimes been referred to, or often is referred to, as a B2? That's a request for adjustment. And that request coming especially from your importer side is possibly you've identified that maybe earlier information was missing, something needs to be changed, but there's already been a CAD submitted. You're requesting an adjustment. Present day, there's paperwork involved, there's a formal review, there's all of these things that happen which can be timely. After October 21st, we are going to be granted the ability to go back into the CARM client portal, access that original transaction, and update it. You can make corrections during a period of time that are penalty free. There's no limit on the corrections that you can make, the number of corrections. And the only kind of corrections that you will not be able to make are ones which are kind of core identity corrections. Things like you cannot fully cancel the transaction. You are not going to be able to change the transaction number because that's its identifier. And you won't be able to change like the business number. Other than that, you can make all of those corrections. And each time you make a correction, I think we've highlighted it here, you're going to be creating a new version of that CAD, but it'll be linked to the original transaction number that was used. Now, do not worry, we have it stated here, and it says the payment due date. You're going to be going over what the payment due date looks like and where it falls. But for a basic understanding, from the time that you submit your CAD all the way up to your payment due date, you can make basically as many corrections as you would like, and they're penalty free. So we're going to say the payment due date, which we're going to outline in more detail in a few slides. From that point on and after, that period is going to be referred to as the adjustment period. Now, an adjustment period is the period where corrections, again, of course, will be accepted. However, depending on the nature of the correction, it may or may not incur penalties or extra duties and taxes and stuff. If it's a really simple adjustment that you need to make, the benefit of working it or submitting it in the portal again is that most adjustments are pretty simple, and the system itself will be able to review and approve, meaning it's a very short and quick turnaround for the process, whereas present day, it's reviewed by a human or an officer, I guess specifically a human officer. For a number of the adjustments submitted, it's not going to be necessary anymore because the system is capable of doing it. But second to that, if it is a more complex adjustment that's been submitted, any information or communication, you're able to do it directly in the portal. So it'll be back and forth much faster. Fantastic. We are going to move over and we're going to start looking at key changes. This one is going to be key change for the release prior to payment, or the RPP program. I know everyone's excited about this one. And at this time, I'd like to invite my colleague Sabrina to step in and tell us all about it.
Great, thanks, Debbie. Okay, so first off, we'll start with what is RPP, or the Release Prior to Payment program. So it's a program that entitles importers to obtain the release of goods from the CBSA before paying duties and taxes, to allow you to defer accounting for goods and defer payment of duties and taxes. So at the time of CARM's official external launch, all importers who wish to participate in the RPP program will be required to enroll in RPP and then post their financial security, as importers will no longer be able to use their broker's financial security. However, it's important to remember that RPP participation is not required. So if you choose not to enroll in RPP, importers will be required to present themselves at the port of entry to pay duties and taxes in full at the time of release. So those will be your C-type entries, and then provide the customs accounting declaration, or your CAD, at the same time. But it's important to note that whether or not you choose to enroll in RPP, you still need to register in the portal to be able to complete your customs accounting declaration, or your CAD. Great, thanks. Next slide, please. So the CBSA is aware that organizing these new requirements will take a little bit of preparation. So the CBSA has built in a release prior to payment transition period. So this is a fixed 180-day period to allow importers who have a CARM client portal account or a history of importing commercial goods into Canada and account in goods and an account in good standing to automatically benefit from the RPP transition period. So if you're an importer and you qualify, you don't need to do anything to enroll. This will happen automatically to give you time to acquire financial security while ensuring that border disruptions are mitigated. Now, alternatively, if this doesn't apply to you and you're a new importer, you can still benefit from the RPP transition period. So once CARM is externally launched in October, new importers registering will also be eligible to benefit from the remainder of the 180 days. So to do this, new importers will need to register on the CARM client portal and then enroll in RPP. Now, when you enroll, the portal will let a new enrollment be approved with a value of $0. But once that account begins to import goods, the CARM solution will then start sending notices to increase financial security or pay the balance. And again, the 180-day transition period begins on October 21st. So for any new importers enrolling in RPP after the external release date, they'll benefit from the remainder of the 180-day transition period. So for example, 180 days on October 21st. So if you enroll on October 22nd, you'll benefit from 179 days of the RPP transition period. So again, this will allow you to be enrolled easily, but it'll also give you some time helping with some seamless importation even before you're fully set up. But once you are, the next step would be to calculate your financial security, which we'll go over in the next slide. So for posting and calculating your financial security, we'll begin by discussing calculating your financial security in the coming slides. But as a brief summary, there's two ways to post your financial security. So the first is the form of a cash security or a cash deposit, which is a deposit that the importer makes on the CARM client portal to guarantee against importer debt. So this deposit or payment is then linked to the RPP program. Now, a cash security will be 100% of your total accounts receivable for a single month over the last 12 months. And then upon withdrawal from RPP, the deposit will be refunded to your importer account. Now, the second option on the second part of the slide here is the written security agreement. And that's an agreement, for example, a customs bond that's provided by the financial security provider to act as a guarantee against the importer debt. So this will amount to 50% of the highest monthly accounts receivable with a minimum of $5,000 and a maximum of $10 million per RM importer program account. Now, your written security agreement, again, is an agreement developed outside of the portal between you and your surety provider, but there's two ways that you will be able to communicate this agreement to the CBSA. So the first is through a bond application program interface, or an API, by the financial security provider, or the CARM client portal by the importer, so subsequently approved by the financial security provider. And again, importers will only be able to post their financial security in the CCP after the external launch of CARM in October 2024. Next slide, please. So I know we've covered some of this information in the previous slide, but let's briefly review accounts receivable for the CBSA. So when you're calculating your financial security, the amount is based on the highest accounts receivable of the past 12 months prior to enrollment on the CCP. So you might be wondering what's included in the accounts receivable. Well, it includes assessment transactions accounted for on the CAD, corrections, adjustments, and CBSA-initiated transactions posted to an importer's account. So for example, that would be applicable AMPs, CBSA-initiated corrections or adjustments, and drawbacks or manual bills. And then just underneath that, that yellow box on the right, you'll see another question that we get all the time, which is how much does a written security agreement cost? So purchasing a written security agreement is just like purchasing insurance. So you wouldn't pay $1 million to buy $1 million of insurance. And you can talk to your own security provider to get a quote. But for example, the CBSA received a quote from a large-scale surety provider on the approximate cost to acquire financial surety of $25,000 Canadian for a period of a year. So they provided a quote of about $425 US, which includes the bond fee, processing fee, and agency fee. So in this case, it would be about $570 Canadian. Now, lastly, before we move on to our next slide, just a quick note on how the CARM system is set up to monitor your financial security utilization rate. So if your account is approaching your financial security limit, which would be at 75%, you'll begin to receive notifications that payments or additional security might be required. And another feature through the portal, you can also monitor your own financial security utilization rate yourself. But not to worry if you, it won't happen where one day you'll have RPP and the next day you suddenly won't. There's going to be significant messaging advising importers that they need to increase their security or apply payments to their account. Next slide, please. Great. So now we'll just be going over some new changes to billing cycles. So at October's official external launch, your billing cycle will become harmonized. So instead of having different due dates for each transaction, all transactions for a set period of time will be listed on a statement of account and have one due date. So your SOA will show all transactions that occur on an account, and that includes declarations, penalties, reassessments, and adjustments. So here on the slide, you'll see an actual representation for what a harmonized billing cycle would look like in January 2025, for example. So first, on the left side of the timeline, you'll see the billing period. Now, your billing period includes transactions that have taken place during a specific time. So in this case, you're looking at the billing period from the 18th of January, so that would be month 1, to the 17th of January, which would be month 2. And this would include all the entries or transactions you have put forth. So those would be broker-initiated transactions or CBSA-initiated transactions. Now, your statement account will be issued on the 25th of month 2, so that'll be February 25th, and it'll have a payment due date set 10 weekdays after the 17th of month 2. So in this case, 10 weekdays after February 17th would bring you to March 3rd. And just to note, when we're talking about a weekday, that'll be a day of the week other than Saturday or Sunday. Now, a couple common questions that we get. First off, what do I do if the payment due date is on a stat holiday, for example, if it falls on Christmas? So the due date won't change because of the stat holiday. However, in practical terms, CBSA won't be issuing any unexpected penalties or adjustments on a stat holiday. So a reasonable approach would be to confirm the total amount owing on the day prior to the payment due date, and then to make a full payment at that time. So this would be comparable to a credit card statement being due on a statutory holiday. Now, another question we get as well is what happens if you're not available, if you're ill, if you're on vacation, who can make that payment for me? Well, if you don't use the services of a broker who might be able to make that payment on your behalf, you're able to assign the role of your business account manager or your BAM to make to more than one person. So if you are one of the BAMs and you're unavailable, you can assign that role to an additional BAM to make that payment on your behalf. Perfect, thank you. So just a brief overview of the billing cycles for C-type clients versus RPP clients. So for the C-type clients or non-RPP participants, The importers will clear their goods in person at the port of entry. So all transactions or your CAD completed at the port of entry will still appear on your statement of account. And if no other transactions have occurred on your account, including penalties, reassessments, or adjustments, this statement of account will reflect an amount of $0 owing. Now, alternatively, for RPP participants, you'll submit your CAD within 5 business days after release to avoid late accounting penalties. So all transactions or your CAD will be submitted between the 18th of the previous month and the 17th of the current month, and that will be reported on your statement of account. And again, the statement of account date is 10 weekdays, including holidays, after the 17th of the second month. Perfect, thanks. Now I'll jump back to Debbie, and she'll discuss a few of the key changes to payments.
Amazing. Thank you, Sabrina. Okay, so this is going to be a very short little section, to be honest. We're going to be focusing C-type clients. So again, those cash type or at the port of entry clients, what it's going to look like for them. And then we're going to compare it to the RPP clients or participants. So first, if you're a C-type client or an at the port cash type client and you pay at the port of entry, then you're going to be paying to affect the release of your goods, and you're paying at the port of entry. So at the port of entry, you'll be able to pay using a debit or a credit card or cash. Now, if you have penalties or reassessments and processes like that, you will be able to pay them both at the port of entry as well as on the portal. Now, if you're an RPP participant and you've enrolled in that program, then you are able to pay directly on the CARM client portal, or you can set up a PAD, and that's that pre-authorized debit system. Importers are going to be able to pay through online banking, electronic data exchange, or that EDI, or pre-authorized debit, that PAD that we were talking about on the portal. We always recommend, if you do work with a broker, have the conversation now with your broker to figure out who it is that is planning to pay for both your, setting up your PAD payments, as well as who's going to be paying on your behalf. We want to make sure that only one of you is paying, so you don't double pay for anything, and to make sure that your payment agreements are in place. We have a whole group of banks that have already elected to work with us. If you find that your online bank, and this is how you're choosing to pay, is not on our list or it's not available, we recommend speaking to them so they can make an application to ensure that CBSA can use them, or will accept CBSA really for use on their portal. Okay, we're going to slide over and we're going to look at kind of a final, I guess I always refer to this as a final benefit. Now, present day, you, or I shouldn't say you, any of the importers that have been importing for however long, access to your transaction history has only been available by requesting it from your broker or requesting a formal statement of account from the CBSA. This is requesting this information to be made available to you and then arriving whenever it does arrive. Because you are going to be registered in the portal, your account visibility is going to be so much greater, and you're going to now have access to a live list of your transaction history. Now, this includes the transactions that, if you're a C-type or a cash type importer and you've submitted all of these entries at the port of entry, you'll see those transactions. If you do this and you work with a broker, or you only work with a broker, you'll see the transactions that have been submitted on your behalf. You'll see CBSA initiated transactions, whether that's an assessment or anything else. You will see a live list of the business that you conduct with the CBSA, and anytime you go in, it will be updated with whatever business or process has occurred, and you can see it as a live list. There's no waiting for this information. It's your information, and now you have immediate access to it. The second piece is you're going to see this statement of account. We've highlighted it on the screen for you. Again, we were talking about statement of account. It used to be something that you needed to, that was issued if you work with a broker, was issued to your broker for them to use to create your invoices and how they can, bill you. However, now you've got access to your own statement of account. Now, this definitely does not mean that you cannot work with, that you cannot work with your broker for payment, all of those things, but you're able to see exactly when and what is being charged. And this is perfect timing, sliding us on over to the next slide. And this is just kind of a good example of when you're looking at your transaction history, As a note, this access here is going to be authorized only to users who you have authorized as the importer or via delegation of authority, which would very much be like your BAM or your business account manager. And then delegation of authority, the broker that you've afforded, you've created that business relationship, and a lot of them that access to your profile. So your transaction history will show your account balance, which includes all your open debits and credits, which means that you're going to be able to see everything that could potentially be owing on your account, as well as going to tell you what is payable, meaning which amount is going to be due and payable at the end of that payment or billing period. So I know it's kind of a quick switch over, but I really do want to invite Sabrina back over just for a final bit before we move over into next steps, resources, and some time for question and answer. Sabrina, why don't you join us and go a little bit over CARM cutover and our transaction periods?
Perfect, thank you. So we'll just go over now the cutover period and transition period. So for the cutover period, it's a period of time to allow the porting of information into the CARM portal. So some systems will be retiring, the Customs Commercial System or CCS, and the Customs Automated Data Exchange or CADEX will be retiring. During this time, the CCP will be unavailable for use and for registration. So to register on the CARM client portal, you'll want to register before or right after the cutover period, which will begin on October 4th and run until October 21st, 2024. So ports of entry will process the release of goods as a due today when an outage occurs. So C-type importers will be able to submit their B3 entries. And then once the cutover window closes, border service officers will input and verify the information across. But it's important to note that the cutover will not affect the release of your goods. And for more information, we'd really encourage you to review the Customs Notice 2429. It's entitled Preparing for the CARM October Implementation Cutover Period. It's a really helpful resource to really break down in detail what to expect during the cutover period. And just underneath there, you'll see the transition period. So the CBSA has developed transition measures to ensure continued border fluidity and timely submission of accounting and payment of duties after CARM implementation on October 21st. So the transition period in part includes the RPP 180-day transition period, which we've already covered. But again, just briefly, that the 180 days is to automatically benefit from RPP, which will give importers and their service providers time to adapt to the new financial security model and avoid border disruptions. But this is only a small portion of a full 12-month transition period, which will ensure the fluid release of goods, timely accounting, and payment of amounts owing. So there's so many benefits to the transition period, but one of these would include scenarios for continuing to use your broker's BN15 for a period of time. And again, for a detailed summary of the upcoming transition period, you'll see the Customs Notice 2427 linked below, entitled CARM October Implementation Transition Measures. Here we won't spend too much time going through the resources, but we'll have some additional resources for you. This will include toolkits, onboarding user guides, instructional videos, and of course the contact information for the CARM client support help desk, which you'll receive all of this information as well. Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Sabrina. Thank you, Debbie. There's lots of more information and links there at the end of the presentation that you can use. I've been following the the Q&A, and of course the chat. Lots of questions. We do want to thank Trevor and Stephen, who have been doing a good job trying to answer many of the questions on the chat. So thank you for that. That's I think been super helpful. Just for you, Sabrina and Debbie, to know there is a lot of feeling of being overwhelmed, which is not unusual. So I just wanted to give you that sort of overall feeling that's coming back, that people feel like, wow, this is a lot of information for me to understand. But maybe between Michelle and I, we only have about 5 minutes. We can try and ask a couple of the questions that were coming in that maybe weren't addressed through the chat. So I don't know, Michelle, if you had 1 or 2 in mind that you wanted to jump in on, and then I can maybe ask 1 or 2.
Yeah, well, the first one that came up, and maybe we can also comment on it here, Corinne, but is it concerning that CBSA officials here see that as of August 2024, there appears to be a lot of CFIB members who aren't registered to CARM? And, you know, I think I think there is some concern that there is still a lot of businesses to get onboarded. And I think we're trying to do as much education and outreach as we can from CFIB's perspective. And we do understand, like I've been following the chat and I've been looking at some of the comments, and it's daunting. It's a new tool, it's a new technology. And I empathize, pardon me, but it's kind of like my BA at CRA. I think at first people were a little hesitant about that new tool and the technology, and there's a bit of a learning curve that comes with that. And I completely understand. And if at any point anybody wants to talk to a business counselor or connect with us offline, like we'll certainly be there to help you as well.
I mean, I can definitely, unless Sabrina wants to jump in, I can definitely speak to that. I think there's not just the awareness, but this is a lot of times the feedback that we get from CBSA or at CBSA as well, is that people are feeling a bit overwhelmed. So the first thing I will speak to is in terms of enrollment numbers and stuff. Of course, we are tracking the same things, and we're finding that for the majority of like our larger importer groups and things like that, we actually have a pretty good uptake. Like we're talking 95-96% of those groups already registered. However, I think we can see reflected in our numbers as well that for those smaller importers, like our C type, those cash types which you're talking about today, we still have a bit of work to do to get people onboarded into the portal, which is again why we're so happy to be able to be here and provide some guidance. In terms of being worried, I think a lot of times when we're looking at getting comfortable, like you said, with a new tool, with a new process, I really do see that CBSA has taken the time to kind of plan ahead for it. Now, I know looking at Cutover and some of those things, I think Sabrina invited everyone to take the time to go through those customs notices. However, to be honest, they're great, but it's not things that a lot of people are going to take the time. And sometimes it doesn't feel like it's really accessible information. And I completely understand that. What is fantastic about what's been set up is that the transition period that it has been put together is not a transition period of a month or 2 months. The transition period that's been set forth, which is affording a lot of flexibility, is a transition period of 12 months and possibly more if we find that it's needed. And that's, again, to catch the individuals, the companies and stuff that haven't quite been able to catch up and make this process work for them. So supports like that definitely are in place. Again, we invite very much for those technical in-portal supports to reach out to our CARM client, like the service help desk and stuff. But we're also still going to be here. We're implementing a period of hypercare. So immediately after October 21st, it's across the agency. What we're hearing is all hands on deck to make sure that we're available to continue supporting our businesses, all of our businesses, small included, with business readiness to take on CARM and to, function and perform well using this new tool.
And I think a lot of the sentiment, of course, is, they've had their broker do that, or they've had FedEx or UPS do that for them, or even, the Canada Post.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for folks to know, and I think Trevor and Stephen have done a good job in trying to say this. You can still use the broker. You just have to make sure you've designated them as an authority on. And the only thing that they can still do the CAD, they can still do many of those day-to-day transactions. The only piece that you do have to take on, which you didn't before, is making sure that you have either the RPP, the release prior to payment in place, whether that's a surety or a cash bond. So that is the piece that I think people are worried about. They don't understand, well, what's a financial security provider? How do I find them? Even $400 American is a lot of money for small businesses every year. So those are the types of responses that we're getting. So I just wanted to share that with you. One of the questions I am going to ask, though, while we only have a couple minutes left, is imports through the post office.
Sure.
They go through this as well.
Well, they will go through this as well. So when you're importing something through the postal stream, majority of those are going to have to fall within like a certain, I guess, like a baseline of what's coming in. The majority of things coming in through the postal stream we call them casual. So they're just going to be, you're going to be granted your service charge. You're going to pay right at the post office, or if it's whatever it is, it's really simple. If you are importing your commercial goods to the postal stream, we still say register on the CARM client portal, because if they go over and above, and I think this one, and I'm just looking at my system right now, because I know postal stream, they're still working out some kinks, to be completely honest. In terms of how we're going to be applying applying that process. The basic is if it's over and above that 3,300, that baseline amount, then they're not going to be able to fall under that CLVS program, which still applies for your mail importations. They're above it. So if it's falling within, then at this point, we're not, it's going to be processed through it to make it a facilitation entry, and it's going to be facilitated to come in. But the question that I keep coming up with in thinking of practicality to be prepared, register in the portal, and then if it's found that, for example, your entry or your commodity doesn't fall within, I just saw a comment come up, doesn't fall within that amount, then you will be called to actually submit a formal declaration. But I know that we're kind of going outside of the information of the deck, but I know that this is an important question that has come up, and I know we're running out of time. If it's helpful, I'm more than happy to go through and create kind of a little bit of an info package that's just going to be dealing with importations commercially that come through the mail center. I'm going to be gone for a few days, but I can have that, and you can, if you'd like, to distribute it to your membership by the end of next week.
Sure, I think that would be a good thing to do something. We're also at CFIB going to take many of the questions that are here today and use them to build our own frequently asked questions and try to make sure that we're asking these questions of CBSA and getting the answers that you need. I know we didn't get to a lot of these questions, and so we apologize for that. But what we are going to do is that's what we're going to make sure that we find answers to most of these questions and put them up on our website so that you have them there. As Michelle mentioned earlier, if you have questions, you can always call us. We're also here to help give you the answers or find the answers for you. Just call our helpline. And Michelle, remind me what that number is.
Oh, I don't have it handy. I'll post it in the chat here in just a sec, so everyone has it right before we head out.
Yes.
But I also just want to add before we leave, if anybody wants to email us or send us comments on the portal, we're always happy to listen and have the conversation with you. We are here to support and hear you out as well.
And we're also here to provide feedback to CBSA about what needs to be fixed, how it could be improved for small businesses. So also your comments and feedback we take very seriously, and we will provide that information to CBSA in trying to make efforts to improve this whole process. There is a very small possibility this could be delayed again, but we're not sure at this point in time. There was some changes from a parliamentary committee yesterday evening. But at this point in time, everything moves forward as of October 21st, I believe it was. And we are here to help you as a CBSA. You'll see all the information on the deck that was downloaded hopefully by now for you, so you can contact them or us. Any last words, Debbie or Sabrina, that you would like to share?
No, you know what? Pleasure to be here. Wonderful support from your membership through your agency. But again, we're here to provide that support both to yourselves and your membership as well, whatever we can do to assist.
Michelle, any last words from you?
Yeah, thank you both so much for being here. Again, I know it's so much content and it's a lot, it's a learning curve, but let's try to get through it. And feel free to call or send us your feedback, anybody, please.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
And
thank you for having us.
Thank you everybody for joining. And with that, we are going to close the webinar.